Sequels are interesting territory. They always offer an opportunity to improve, to iterate, or even just completely revamp a franchise. And while it's fascinating when studios take games like Crash Bandicoot and turn it into this, it always feels more natural when they embrace what already exists and mold it into something that feels more like an evolution instead of a reimagining of the entire concept. There are lots of examples of this out there, but one of the most prominent is Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage, or Gateway to Glimmer if you're from Europe, or Spyro and Sparks Tandemo Tours if you're from Japan. But anyway, Spyro 2 released in 1999, only 1 year after the original Spyro the Dragon, which, if you think about it, is actually an astronomically short amount of time. They only had about 14 months to work on this thing. Mind you, we're talking about the reignited version of the game today, which came out 19 years later. If you want more context as to why, check out my video on the first game. There's a link up there in the corner. Every aspect of Spyro 2 had to take cues from Spyro 1, and that ended up being a major theme throughout the game. Basically, Spyro 1 served as a foundation for what would become a major franchise, turning the first game from its own unique experience, which it still is, by the way, into almost a proof of concept for the character. Spyro 2 constantly reaches back to take bits and pieces from the first entry in the series and reuse them as inspiration and a basis for improvement. Even the name is borrowed from the first game. And I don't mean Spyro, I mean the Ripto's Rage part of it. If you've been a fan of the franchise for a long time, you probably already know this, but if you're new to the game and its history, Ripto actually gets his name from the Japanese name for Spyro. Not literally, mind you, Spyro is still called Spyro in Japan, but when you see the box art...
Oh yeah, it's all coming together.
And then there's the story. I always start these videos with an introduction to it, you know, for like context or whatever, but then Spyro 2 comes along and, well, when we last saw Spyro, he had just defeated Nasty Nork, but during his last interview with the TV news crew, the dragons were once again turned to crystal, and he rushed off to save the day, leaving room for a sequel. But turns out, it doesn't really continue in the way you might expect. Ripto's Rage opens on a gloomy day in the artisan's homeworld. And I guess Spyro and Sparks must have already saved the dragons again because they don't seem to be too concerned about it. Instead, the pair decide it's about time to ditch the rainy weather and take a vacation to Dragon Shores. Meanwhile, 3 new characters, Elora, Hunter, and the Professor, are gathered around a portal, discussing their attempts to bring a dragon into Avalar to help rid them of the tyranny of Ripto, the big bad of this game. The Professor's portal experiment succeeds and drags Spyro into Avalar, but shortly after, the portal explodes, destroyed by none other than Ripto himself, accompanied by his 2 beastly henchmen, Crush and Gulp. When Ripto discovers that the group brought a dragon into their world, he raises his scepter in an attempt to destroy them too, but not before a fairy manages to steal it just long enough for Gulp to swallow the scepter himself. It's at this point that Ripto leaves, swearing that he'll deal with you later. Elora asks for Spyro's help to get rid of him and then rushes off to Summer Forest, leaving Spyro and Sparks to find their own way out of this mess. So, as you can see, the story is a lot more comprehensive in this game compared to the first one. The cutscenes are longer and tell a more complete story. They're more than just a motivation to tell you what the goal of the game is. Now, we get to touch a little bit on the how and the why, and the characters are a little more fleshed out, even if we only just met them. This is literally just the opening scene. I'm saving the bulk of the story for later, but it's interesting to note how this game is already iterating on what came before. We've already met a bunch of new characters and basically saw more story than existed in the entirety of the first game. Spyro 2 is, again, an upgraded version of Spyro 1, and it definitely comes through in aspects of the story such as this, but not all of the changes are as immediately obvious as the addition of more cutscenes and an overall more comprehensive story. Some elements of the game are just tweaked in order to give you a smoother gameplay experience. Take the goal structure and collectibles for instance. Spyro 1 had a total of 6 homeworlds if we're including Nasty's world. Spyro 2 only has 3. They work out to be around the same amount of content as well, with each game featuring around 30 levels, give or take. In Spyro 2, each of the 3 homeworlds is themed around a season, starting in Summer Forest, progressing to Autumn Plains, and ending in Winter Tundra, centering the homeworld themes around time, which is something that will continue in the 3rd game. If you want to see my video on that one, by the way, don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell. This seasonal theming really emphasizes the progression in the game. Time moves forward with you. As for how you progress, well, it's pretty similar to Spyro 1. Every level has a beginning and an end, with a myriad of optional objectives and exploration to do along the way. Instead of rescuing dragons and saving their eggs, this time around you'll be collecting talismans and orbs. Talismans are awarded to you for reaching the end of a level, at least until the end of Autumn Plains. This is how you'll unlock each new homeworld. You need every single one of the talismans in order to progress to the next world as well, which normally might be a bit of an ask for a platformer like this one, but since they're awarded at the end of every level, it's more of a way to track that you've played each one, rather than a total completion thing like dragons were in the first game. And when you get to Winter Tundra, you'll receive orbs instead. These are used to unlock various things like levels, so they are required to progress through the game, and you'll need 40 of them in order to unlock the final boss. As you can imagine, reaching the end of a level isn't the only way to get these. In fact, the most common way to get orbs is also probably my favorite addition to Spyro 2, the minigames. Dude, these are great! Every level has 1 or 2 of these side objectives or mini-games that reward you with an orb for completing them. They introduce neat little mechanics and challenges to complete that also kinda shake up the normal flow of gameplay, something that Spyro 1 didn't really do all too often. However, they definitely are the most difficult part of this game. I mean, I used to struggle a lot with the flying levels, which are now called speedways, just by the way, and those are nothing compared to some of these. Take this one for example. You're in this icy cave where crystals pop out of the ice at regular intervals. Hunter challenges you to collect 15 of them before he does, but dang, is he ever fast! Remember my video about the first Spyro game where I said that Spyro is a great way to introduce someone to video games as a whole? Well, if you're new to games in general, I suspect you'll be having a lot of trouble with some of these. Heck, a lot of experienced gamers struggle to get some of these done. That being said, not all of them are so bad. They're actually all pretty straightforward for the most part, and although you may have to try 1, 2, maybe even a dozen times to complete some of these, they're also some of the most rewarding parts of the game. Even the ice cave one. See, I could come up with a couple examples of these mini-games that are difficult in their own ways, but ultimately, everybody I know struggles with a different one. None of them are unfair or games of chance, they're actually all pretty well designed. So if you do struggle with one of these and get sick of hearing that one voice line over and over and over again, there's absolutely no shame in skipping it, especially since you don't need all 64 orbs to complete the game. You only need about 1/3 of that. Plus, a lot of these orbs can be acquired in other ways. Some of them just depend on you unlocking special power-ups and then exploring the stage to find out where to use it. It probably also goes without saying that the power-ups have been reworked in this game as well. Some of them are pretty familiar, with old ones like Super Flame and Super Charge making a return from Spyro 1. Others are less familiar, like the Super Freeze, which turns these little troll guys into ice so you can use them as platforms. But nonetheless, they're all just as intuitive to use as they've always been. The biggest change comes from how you get the power-ups. Where Spyro 1 needed you to get smooched by a fairy or charge along a special platform, Spyro 2 requires that you defeat some amount of enemies, which will unlock a power-up gate. Run through the gate, you get the power-up. Easy as that. Other than that, the only things you need to collect in order to beat the game are gems. I mean, they already made perfect sense in the first game, so why not keep them? This time around, instead of supplying a decent wage for an honest working balloon cabbie, we're gonna be stuffing the pockets of the rich. Money bags! Yeah, so this con man takes notice of Spyro's ability to collect vast sums of gems and crops up everywhere just to harass you. Well, not just to harass you. He blocks off parts of the world and charges a massive toll to let you through. He'll also teach you new abilities like swimming and climbing, provided you dish out a small fee. The abilities themselves are pretty low-key, but they are required to progress and also to reach certain areas of earlier levels, so getting them kind of serves as an incentive to return to those early levels and explore them more thoroughly. Depending on your stance on backtracking, this could be a nice touch or a bit of a hassle, but seeing as I view Spyro as a great game for casual or new players, I really like this. You can reach the end of a level and not worry about if you've gotten everything just yet, because there's a fairly good chance you might return to that level later anyway. If you're just popping into a game to explore and have fun, this kind of incentive to return to earlier parts of the game is a great addition. Plus, let's be honest, as annoying as Moneybags is as a character, it's kinda nice to have the variation in how collectibles are used in Spyro. Instead of meeting some arbitrary thresholds of collectibles to progress, you now have to use each type in their own special ways. And don't worry, I hear you.
But Cosmo, what about the cool cutscenes we used to get when we saved dragons? Do we not get those when we collect stuff anymore?
Well, no, but we do get something else in its place. You see, each level opens up with its own cutscene, sort of setting the stage for everything that happens within it. They're short and sweet, but yeah, they're sweet. They add a ton of personality to the game. Spyro never really struggled with injecting personality into its characters and environments in the first place, so the fact that these little scenic introductions play for each and every level just enhances that. And if that wasn't enough, another one plays after you leave the level, wrapping up the story that takes place there. These cutscenes aren't necessary by any means, but it's those little touches that really make the Spyro franchise what it is. It's all about character, so focusing in on the inhabitants of the levels is kind of the perfect way to emphasize that. And it gets to tell a little micro story along the way, just extra stuff. It's nice. And when you're done with the levels, you get to fight the boss, which is also vastly improved. The previous game saw you running through short levels before getting to a boss that didn't really prove any challenge. Just smack them 3 times and boom, they're out. But in Spyro 2, they do away with that initial level junk. Get it out of here, it's blocking the way to the cool boss fight. Yeah, that's right, it's a cool boss fight this time. None of that smack 'em a couple times to win stuff for babies. This is the second game. We're real gamers now. Wow, I hate myself. Anyway, yeah, we get thrown into one of those cool big flat circle boss fight arenas now and pit ourselves against Ripto's henchmen, which actually put up a good fight. These guys are challenging. Not like restrictively so, but in a nice, fun way. This time, instead of running up to the dudes and smacking them, we've got to run around and avoid attacks, all while looking for a nice opening so we can go up and smack them, or use a power-up and smack them with that or something. Point is, the boss fights are engaging, much more so than the previous entry in the series. I worry that if I call them complex, somebody might misinterpret that as meaning they're difficult, or that I'm praising difficulty. But that couldn't be further from the case. I actually think one of the reasons why Spyro works so well in the first place is strictly because it's not difficult. But these boss fights do actually add some complexity to the gameplay. They give you more to do than simply hit square to win. Now you've got to use your brain and your reflexes if you want to beat the boss, and that makes it rewarding. These boss fights are a lot more memorable to me than any of the ones from Spyro 1, which is absolutely a shame. The boss characters in Spyro 2 were like, well, I mean, they're boring, right? Am I the only one? Their sole-defining characteristic is that they're green and blue and they work for Ripto. I don't know. The boss characters in Spyro 1 were cool and unique. I mean, check out Toasty. He's a sheep on stilts who disguises himself as a scarecrow to get revenge on Spyro for toasting all of his friends in order to feed Sparks. That's interesting. And I had to look it up for this video because the fight was so unremarkable that it never had a chance to stick with me in the first place. It's a shame. An absolute crying shame. But I still liked it. Yell at me in the comments. Let's talk about story. After we leave Glimmer and find our way to Summer Forest, we meet Elora for real this time. Spyro shows off his cool new souvenir, which turns out to be a talisman. Elora explains that the talismans are magical objects, and if Spyro could collect all 14 of them, they could be used to defeat Ripto. Later, Elora explains to Spyro how Ripto arrived in Avalar, basically the same way that he did. The professor built a so-called super portal, and to test it, Hunter entered his birth date as the coordinates, the 22nd of April, 1975, meaning this guy is 46 years old. Huh. Ripto is pulled into this world, and after seeing its distinct lack of dragons, he declares himself king. Allura tells the fairies to scatter the orbs across Avalar to prevent Ripto from taking advantage of their portal technology. He's then carried off by one of the fairies, and the crew gets to work constructing a new portal so they can catch a dragon. Spyro. They caught Spyro. After defeating Ripto's henchmen, Allura tells Spyro that the creatures of Avalar are finally getting along and that there's no sign of Ripto. She then sets Spyro up with a chair and an umbrella so he can enjoy a bit of vacation for all of his hard work. She then takes off to check in on the professor, who's still working on the super portal so they can send Spyro back home. Back at the portal, the professor's tapped into a magic power crystal that should give them the extra boost that they need to send Spyro back home. But then Ripto shows up and, using the bombs he purchased from Moneybags, steals it from them. Then he turns it into a cool scepter with which to destroy them all once and for all. And then he plans on renaming the place to Riptonia. There's gotta be better names, right? Riptonia? Really? Anyway, he's still pretty incompetent and can't even use the new scepter he made, so Spyro shows up and kicks his butt. This is actually a pretty standard boss fight. Just like with Crush and Gulp, you run around on a big flat circle type boss arena thingy, but this time Hunter drops all sorts of power-ups onto the stage for you to use against Ripto. And when you defeat him, his big Robo-Gulp thingy explodes, killing Hunter in the process. He was so young. Then, Ripto conjures up a new robot, and the rest of the battle takes place high above the lava as you chase him down and hit him with your super flame. It's pretty cool that this is a two-stage boss. This is the first time we actually see anything like this in a Spyro game. And maybe you can let me know in the comments if this is wrong, but I'm pretty sure this is the only time we see something like this in the original trilogy. You could definitely argue that the other boss fights are multi-stage as well, because the boss patterns do change as their health gets lower, but this is a lot more dramatic, as Ripto gets a second health bar and a whole new arena. It's basically two different fights back to back. That being said, I really wish the second half of the fight was a little more interesting. There's not a lot of complexity to this one other than fly around, don't get hit, and shoot the bad guy. Pretty much boiling it down to something a lot more similar to my complaints about the first game. Which, like, it's not the end of the world, but, you know, I wish it was more exciting. After you defeat Ripto, he plummets into the lava, never to be seen again. Until he shows up again in Enter the Dragonfly, and then you see... Never to be seen again! Spyro is then greeted by the rest of the cast back at the portal, where they physically assault Moneybags, serves him right, return the gems, and the professor fixes the portal so Spyro can head off to Dragon Shores. The end. It's a pretty sweet story for a pretty sweet game. And we get another bonus level at the end, Dragon Shores. It's full of cool little carnival games and rides to play around on, and when you finish, you unlock a little theater where you get to rewatch all of the cutscenes. On top of that, if you collect 100% of the collectibles, you unlock the ability to use Super Flame wherever and whenever you want. And if you're still craving more from this game, the second entry in the series added a little something called skill points. They're pretty cool, just a small collection of optional objectives to go for, like finishing the speedways under a certain time limit or getting a perfect score in hockey. Think of them as kinda like achievements, and when you get them all, you unlock a little art book to enjoy. In the PS1 version of the game, this was actually a little epilogue storybook you could flip through and learn what happened to all of the characters after the game ended. That was honestly way cooler than what we got in Reignited. It's worth a Google search if you really want to see them too. I should probably also mention that upon the release of the Reignited Trilogy, they went back and added skill points to the previous game. So if you want to play the first one and see some concept art from that one too, you sure as heck can. It's really nice to see the developers go back on pre-existing designs and update them just a little bit so that the whole trilogy has a touch more cohesion. And that ties us right back into the theme of the game. Spyro 2 is all about taking the original design for the game and enhancing it, adding more to do, more complexity to the game, and generally creating a better feeling experience. Even in the Reignited Trilogy, mechanics get improved in small ways. Power-ups are a bit more streamlined, collectibles have unique uses, the bosses are far more engaging and much more memorable. Even the story's expanded and explored in a deeper way. If the trend between these two games continues, I cannot wait to play the third one. Year of the Dragon was always my favorite growing up, so now I'm more excited than ever to dive in and actually find out why. If you want to see my video on that one, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell for notifications. For now, I've been Cosmo. Thanks for watching. Why are there animal turtles and people turtles?